Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 15th CCG VIP Luncheon here at the Grand Millennium Beijing. It's a great pleasure to gather with all of you today as we focus on the crucial topic, bolstering trade and investment to build resilient industry and supply chains together. First, let me extend our warmest welcome to all our esteemed guests from various sectors, whose insights and expertise will undoubtedly enrich the discussions today. Now, it's my honor to invite Dr. Henry Huiyao WANG, President of CCG and former Counsellor of China State Council, to deliver the welcome address. Dr. Wang has long been at the forefront of promoting international cooperation and global governance, and his perspectives on today's theme here are particularly invaluable. Please join me in welcome Dr. Wang. Welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Zhang Wei, our Deputy Secretary General of CCG. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you again to 15th CCG VIP Luncheon. How time flies. We already had this run for 15 times. So thank you all taking the time out of your summer, holiday schedule to come at this also very important CCG gathering. We're also quite aware, we have seen a number of European ambassadors. We know there's a summit going on between China and the EU leaders today in town. So this is really a great thanks for all of you to come. The CCG VIP Luncheon series, initiated and hosted by Center for China and Globalization, has become an important platform and the brand for dialogue and exchange. It brings together diplomats, international organizations, leading enterprises, also academic experts, of course, and also media friends that to share the insights on China's development and foster mutual understanding and cooperation in an increasingly turbulent world. That is, change between China and the outside world is so crucial. So today's launch is particularly timely as it focuses on bolstering trade and investment to build a resilient industry and supply chain together. So we know that we just actually finished the supply chain conference a few days ago in Beijing. And this discussion follows closely after, of course, the successful conclusion of the third China International Supply Chain Expo, which saw participants from 651 enterprises, multinationals, and institutions representing 75 countries and regions. So such engagement highlights the vital importance of strengthening global supply chains and trade networks in today's complex economic environment. So I would like to extend a special welcome to our esteemed guests. So we're today very privileged to have diplomatic representatives from 22 countries and of course also other media representatives, multinational think tanks, and also of course our very distinguished speakers. So today's, I would like just mention the institution. We have actually invited ambassador of Barbados, the ambassador of Brazil, ambassador of Cyprus, the ambassador of the Netherlands, the ambassador of New Zealand, the ambassador of Norway, the ambassador of Pakistan, the ambassador of Spain, and ambassador of Switzerland to join us. Let's give them a welcome. Okay. In addition, senior diplomats representing from Embassy of Canada, Embassy of Croatia, EU delegation, Embassy of Hungary, Embassy of India, Embassy of Kazakhstan, Embassy of Latvia, Embassy of Malta, Embassy of Pakistan, Embassy of Romania, Embassy of Turkey, Embassy of United Arab Emirates, and Embassy of the United States are also participating in this very timely event. We're also honored to welcome representatives from international organizations such as UNICEF and more. Further, today's launch features participants from large leading companies, including Bayer's, Bingo China, BMW China, ByteDance, ENISPA, MSD China, Procter & Gamble, Royal Bank of Canada, Tiansu Intelligent Robot, Shenzhen Tala Group Limited, and NEO. So a number of interesting business representatives. But also, we also have the representative from the media, from CGTN, from Chao Media, China Daily, South China Morning Post, Straits Times, and also we have also think tank representative from China in Beijing as well. So thank you all once again for this support of this engagement, and this is very important, timely to get this discussion and launching going at this time. So really appreciate all of you coming, taking time out of his busy schedule. But I would like to really to highlight, to start with, because we're going to have a panel discussion right after this. So I would like to highlight the four distinguished speakers that we have invited today. So I will introduce them one by one. First is the Madame ZHAO Ping. Madame ZHAO Ping, please rise. Madame ZHAO Ping is the president of China Council for the Promotion of International Trade Research Institute, with a background in economic and trade research at the Chinese Academy of Social Science and the Ministry of Commerce. She has led over 150 projects for international organizations and Chinese government ministries. Her works focus on global supply chains, business environment reports, and China's role in global economic governance. She brought actually today with quite a few her report on the supply chain on that. And another speaker is Mr. LIN Shunjie. He's the chairman, China International Exhibition Center Group Corporation. He has a rich leadership experience in government and enterprises with expertise in management, international business, and brand development. He has worked with international organizations and coordinated major economic events across nearly countries. He's knowledgeable in industry policies and supports global companies operating in China, so also very knowledgeable. And then we have another speaker, Professor Wenhua. He's a professor of law at the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing, specialized in international economic law and global economic governance. He holds key positions such as co-chair of the WTO Chairs Program and University of International Business and Economics. And also, he was a former official in the Intellectual Property Division of Department of Treaty and Law at the Ministry of Commerce. And he has also published widely. But now, the last but not least, I would highly recommend we have a speaker coming very far from China, just arrived yesterday, Mr. Ravi Agrawal. He's the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine, a leading global publications on international affairs. He was the former senior producer for CNN, and also he was a producer for GPS, well-known program at CNN. He was also a former CNN bureau chief in India, actually. So he's known for his insightful analysis on geopolitics, global trend, and foreign policy issues. So under his leadership, foreign policy continues to influence and engage policymakers and readers worldwide. I was just had a meeting with Ravi, and he was mentioning to me that foreign policy is doing well and has a very large subscriptions. So congratulate on that. And so let's please join me in give them a warm round of applause and invite them to come to the podium. So please come, yeah. So sorry to cut short our speaker's lunch, but I hope the rest of you will continue to enjoy the food for stomach, but also food for thought. So we're going to start our CCG VIP Luncheon special discussion. So, first, as I just mentioned, we have Madame ZHAO Ping. She's the president of China Council for Promotion of International Trade Research Institute. So this is a very important research institute. And I know that CCPIT just hosted the China Supply Chain conference, ended just a few days ago. So perhaps I could start with you, Madame ZHAO Ping. What's your thinking on the topic we have today? And maybe you can give some opening remarks. We're going to have some opening remarks. So Madame ZHAO, first, please.
Thank you. First of all, I will thank you, CCG, giving me such a good opportunity to share our opinion about the global supply chain. And today, I'd like to this opportunity to share the key report named the Global Supply Chain Promotion Report, and the result from the Global Supply Chain Index Matrix we released on the third edition of China International Supply Chain Expo last week in response to Mr. Wang's question. And the 2025 Global Supply Chain Promotion Report, hereinafter referred to as a report, its framework includes three parts: the global sub-report, the China sub-report, and the sub-reports on specific industries. I'd like to have a quick rundown of the global sub-report. Based on the latest and most authoritative data from around the world, the global sub-report leverage the global supply chain promotion analysis model we initiated in 2023 to figure out and summarize the latest trend of the global supply chains over the past year. To begin with, the level of global infrastructure connectivity has continued to improve, and the quality and the growth of infrastructure sector in the global south have been enhanced. In addition, international economic and trade rules pay more attention to the inclusive development of global supply chains. The new WTO agenda focuses on the integration of developing countries into global supply chains, as most of the newly signed multilateral and bilateral trading agreements are led or participated by developing countries and attach great importance to innovation, green transition, and the development of SMEs, providing institutional guarantee for offsetting the impact of trade protectionism and reducing trade and investment costs. Furthermore, major economies attach importance to improving the resilience of their own supply chains. But some policies have shown protectionist and inward-looking tendencies, which is not conducive to global supply chain cooperation. What's more, technological innovation has played an increasingly significant role in driving the development of global supply chains. The increasing maturity of digital technologies, such as augmented reality and generative artificial intelligence, and the accelerated green technologies, such as carbon capture and storage, and smart grid, are pushing global supply chains into a new stage of digital, intelligent, and green development. Finally, the inclusivity of global financial services has increased. International financial institutions have introduced a great number of measures to support financing in developing countries and developed relevant monitoring and management platforms. And supply chain finance was further bridged the trade financing gap of SMEs. effectively guaranteeing the security and stability of global supply chains. Promoting the development of global supply chains has become a common concern of international organizations, major economies, and business communities. This year, based on the Global Supply Chain Promotion Index, GSCPI, and the Global Supply Chain Connectivity Index, GSCCI, initiated in 2024, we have further expanded the scope of global supply chain index research by developing the Global Supply Chain Innovation Index, that is shorted for GSCII, and the Global Supply Chain Resilience Index, that is shorted for GSCRI, to form an index matrix to comprehensively assess the external environment, connectivity, innovation development, and development resilience of the global supply chains. The index matrix takes 2018 as the base period and set a basic value as 1. According to the calculation results of the index matrix, there are 3 main findings. First, the value of the 4 indices have all increased despite the mounting uncertainty and instability factors in the world economy. Positive factors have always occupied a mainstream position, and global supply chains are moving toward a more efficient and dynamic direction. This once again shows that economic globalization is the general trend of the times and the common desire of the people around the world. Second, the average annual growth rate of GSCPI, GSCCI, and GSCII was higher than that of GSCRI and hit historical highs in 2024. GSCRI had declined for 2 consecutive years since 2022, and although the index rebounded in 2024, it didn't recover to its level in 2021. GSCRI would also decline when any of the other 3 indices drops. This indicates that the inherent resilience of global supply chain relatively fragile, and their security and stability are still facing huge challenges. Third, improving the resilience of global supply chains requires concerted efforts by all parties. GSCRI will only rise when all the other 3 indices increase. This means that only when all factors of the global supply chains promoting system work together can the resilience of a global supply chain be truly enhanced. Based on the funding of the report and the index matrix, we put forward the following 5 recommendations. First and foremost, build an efficient and interconnected infrastructure network to provide a more solid external hardware guarantee for the stable operation of global supply chains. And secondly, uphold the openness and inclusiveness of multilateral and bilateral rules, resolve trade disputes through dialogue and consultation, and provide a fairer, more transparency and predictable institutional environment for the safe operation of global supply chains. Next, formulate mutually beneficial and win-win supply chain policies, abandon protectionist and inward-looking mindsets, and jointly promote the diversified layout and safe, efficient operation of global supply chains. Moreover, create a more dynamic environment for innovative development, promote the free cross-border flow of global innovation elements, and inject strong impetus into the quality upgrading of global supply chains. Last but not least, improve the inclusive and secure financial services system to ensure the safe operation of global supply chains. By the way, the report I just mentioned is here with me today. And if you are interested, you can grab a copy just outside the door. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madame Zhao. Yes. A very interesting report. You mentioned many aspects, but of course multilateralism, openness, and I also mentioned the guarantee of the hardware to ensure the supply chain moves smoothly. All those great factors. So thank you for giving this opening, highlight of your report. So we appreciate that. And next, I would like to have LIN Shunjie. He's the chairman of China International Exhibition Center Group Corporation. So Mr. Lin, I know you do a lot of exhibition. You manage many big expo inside, outside China. So how do you see from your angle the supply chain resilience and how we can really enhance in this age of uncertainty? So Mr. Lin, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for inviting me to the stage, and good afternoon, Your Excellencies. I do have a lot of things to share with you, based on Madame Zhao's introduction. I think I will not to make you boring, because we do have millions of interesting stories. We do, a lot of exhibitions, not only in China, but also out of China. We sent over 200 exhibition delegations every year, annually, to other countries. Before pandemic, the number was even higher. And after that, of course, we are recovering. But unfortunately, we have met trade war and tariff war, made everything, very uncertain. I have to say, this year we do have some challenges. Luckily, it's lucky for me, we finished all the projects involved with engaged in the U.S. market at the first half of this year. Then we cannot predict next year, because currently the registration from Chinese trade companies almost zero to any trade fairs in the States. No growth. We do have some registered exhibitors, but I'm not sure if they will really go. It depends on the dialogue. We hope next week in Sweden we can see some good outcomes. So you see, my business is closely connected to the international trade and political situation, which means the impact on the supply chain cooperation is very big now. I think it's a good timing, to talk about the international supply chain cooperation, because the third edition of China International Supply Chain Expo just successfully conducted, last week, and this expo was hosted by CCPIT and organized by my company, China International Exhibition Center Group. Just a small advertisement. My company is the largest exhibition company in China. Our name was given by Mr. Deng Xiaoping in 1980s, which made us a window of China's opening up and reforming to the world. I saw hundreds of global business leaders from 75 countries and regions participating in this expo. They all conveyed a very strong message. That is, in today's uncertain world, stakeholders everywhere are still actively looking for ways to cooperate, trying to turn challenges into new opportunities. And through many international exchanges, we have clearly seen that the call for stronger supply chain cooperation is growing across the globe. It's becoming a shared priority for more and more countries. Since 2023, CCPIT has launched a new initiative, Thousands of Trade Missions Going Global. This is the name of the initiative, Thousands of Trade Missions Going Global. So which means every year, the nationwide CCPIT family sends thousands of business delegations to visit foreign countries and seek for new opportunities of strengthening supply chain cooperation. So last year, 2,249 CCPIT delegations visited 102 countries, and over 50,000 Chinese companies participated in those visits. So as part of Thousands of Trade Mission initiative, my company organized the Supply Chain Expo roadshows in 45 countries. I personally involved in many of them, and I witnessed how important the topic of supply chain cooperation has become to all the countries. So politicians, CEOs of Fortune 500, owners of innovative companies, all are very keen to talk about how to make supply chain more stable, more efficient, and more connected. In South Africa, our delegation led by Mr. Ren Hongbin, chairman of CCPIT, met with Vice President Paul Mashatile. He just visited China last week, and we talked about how to strengthen the supply chain cooperation on green agriculture, clean energy, and digital technology. The Vice President voiced strong support for South Africa and China supply chain cooperation, and later made his special trip to China and participated in the third edition of Supply Chain Expo. At the expo, I saw over 30 South African companies found the opportunities of getting involved in Chinese supply chain, in supply chains of Chinese companies. And the South African government promoted dozens of projects to attract investments from Chinese companies who are ready to support the South Africa and other investment destinations to extend their industrial chains. So that's the purpose of the expo. And in Brazil, we met with Vice President Alckmin to talk about the deeper supply chain cooperation and the Belt and Road Initiative and the BRICS frameworks. Mr. Alckmin said that Brazil hopes to align more closely with China's supply chains and encourage local businesses to take part in the Supply Chain Expo. And in Serbia, President Vučić made the delegation. He praised China's role in maintaining stable global supply chains and expressed strong interest in deepening cooperation in key areas. And in Thailand, we met with ministers of industry and commerce. They all agreed that the need for more collaboration in sectors like smart vehicle, AI, and high-tech manufacturing, and saw the Supply Chain Expo as a key platform to advance more joint projects. I think they are very right, because last week at the expo, I learned that more Chinese car makers are planning to set up more factories or authorize more second-tier suppliers in Thailand, which means instead of purely selling cars in Thailand, Chinese car makers are more seriously considering building their local supply chain step by step, of course. And speaking of smart vehicle industry, I think I have to say Chinese car makers have a more ambitious plans to expand their supply chains in Europe. In Hungary, CATL and BYD's cases definitely inspired a lot of Chinese car makers, like XPeng, a very loyal exhibitor to the Supply Chain Expo. They are developing a very long-term cooperation with European suppliers. I think later this year they have something exciting to announce. And basically, I heard from many car makers that they have a strong interests in Spain, in France, and Austria. And when I met CEOs of BMW and Mercedes-Benz, they all expressed strong support to such movements of investment. And early this year, we also heard very realistic voices from French, German, and Austrian governments and trade associations when we met them. So I think it's the right time for European Commission to make more positive policies. Hope we can see something tangible later this month. Let's pray. So over the past years, exchanges like these happened very often, I would say, covering nearly all the China's major trade partners, whether developed countries or emerging markets, resources-rich nations or tech powerhouses. There are shared view that is, we must keep working together to make supply chains stronger and more resilient. So this is exactly why China International Supply Chain Expo was launched and why it have grown so quickly. Business around the world are finding values here. They are discovering new partners, new opportunities, and new confidence in China's supply chain ecosystem, of course. So as the world's first nationwide, nation-level expo focused on supply chains, the expo brings together all key links, upstream, midstream, and downstream, large and small companies, research and industry, domestic and international players. It's not just about showcasing products. It's about sharing ideas, about building partnerships, and turning supply chain corporations into real actions. So as I mentioned this year, as our Mr. Chair mentioned this year, 651 companies participating this expo, and 35% of them are foreign companies, and over half of them are from Europe and the United States. Again, American exhibitors successfully made the United States the #1 participating country. I would say American companies like this expo most because they understand the importance of a supply chain cooperation with China more than others. So like Jensen Huang, founder and CEO of NVIDIA, attended this expo, and he described China supply chain as a miracle. And Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, he said last year, Apple could not achieve its success without those excellent Chinese suppliers. And Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, boasted the 95% localization of his gigafactory in Shanghai. And I think these three guys are the most they are smart guys in the world, of course. So many of those foreign companies bring their supply chain partners and presented together as chain leaders and chain partners. Their displays covered everything from raw material to advanced technology, from green energy to AI, offering a clear picture of a full supply chain landscape. So the layout of the Supply Chain Expo followed the logic of real supply chains. We grouped the companies by how they work together, encouraging big players, leading small players, and showing the full process from upstream to downstream. Vertically and horizontally, we showcase supply chain services. Visitors could see how different parts of the chain fit together and where they might get involved in the large companies' supply chains. So at this expo, large companies usually showcase their supply chain systems and standards, setting industrial benchmarks and providing solutions to optimize industrial and supply chains. Like Apple, they participate in each edition of the expo, but they never showcase a single Apple products. No iPhone, no MacBook. Tim Cook just brought us the best suppliers in China to showcase how they produce, what kind of machinery they are using, and what kind of standards Apple is maintaining in China. And that opened a big door to other potential suppliers in China. He believes the most completed industrial system in China could support Apple to expand its business in the world. And for innovative SMEs, this expo also offers unique opportunities to engage and exhibit together with big companies, potentially integrating into the supply chains of those industrial leaders. And for foreign governments, this expo, I believe, is an ideal place to see the whole picture of 7 industrial and industrial chains and attract investment from best companies. I would say the right companies to make investment in their countries. And this year, I saw nearly 170 overseas government and business delegations visited my expo, which helped them identifying potential partners and they need most and make meaningful connections. So as Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng rightly pointed out at the opening ceremony of this expo, the CISE will continue to bring together consensus and strength for keeping global supply chains stable and smooth. So, ladies and gentlemen, working together on supply chains is not just important; it's essential for a better future. We will keep improving this expo as a platform for connections and cooperation, and we look forward to building more resilient and open supply chains with all of you. I think it's not only beneficial to my business is very small, just an exhibition and a conference, but will be conducive to all the industries and all the businesses around the world. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Lin. It's fascinating to hear that, for example, you mentioned your company brought 50,000 Chinese enterprises go to different countries for expo, and of course there's a tendency now more Chinese companies that's going global to establish supply chains. So this internationally Chinese company going global probably will help build up the local supply chain, so that we can really facilitate the supply chain integration, that rather than just focused in one place. So, good point. You mentioned many success stories. I'd like to have a Professor Ji. Now, you used to work with BOFCOM, but also, of course, now you are a professor studying this kind of phenomena. So, also we have to be brave for remaining discussion. What do you think about supply chain? In this kind of a turbulent world, how we can do better, how we can more integrate it, how can we improve that from your point of view?
Okay, thank you, President Wang, for inviting me today. And this is a very high-level event, and I'm very pleased that I have the opportunity to share my personal thoughts concerning supply chain industries and the supply chain resilience and stability issue. A little bit different with the two previous speakers. When I studied these issues, I found a lot of disruption, turbulence, confrontations. That's the source of why we are discussing this issue. If everything is okay, of course, and nobody will worry about the stability and the security, because a lot of measures taken by many countries in the past several years. So whole world is talking about how to handle the security and the stability issue of the supply chain. So I write something titled Advancing Multilateral Rules for the Security and Stability of Global Industry and Supply Chain in a New International Landscape. Because I'm a law professor, I always consider what we could do at the multilateral level to elevate some problems and to create a better environment, legal environment, rule-based environment for the world economy, and not only for one country but for the world. So basically, I divide into my presentation into two parts. The first one concerning the current situations. I take note that the time constraint, so I will try to be brief. First, in recent years, global industry and the supply chain have become more complex and politicized. And the strategic rivalry around major powers, geopolitical conflicts, technological disruptions, pandemic, and climate-related challenges have all led to the proliferation of various national-level policies and trade measures aimed at the so-called strengthening the resilience and the security of domestic supply chains. According to my observations, these policy responses and trade actions can be generally grouped into three categories. The first category involves unilateral and inward-oriented measures. Certain countries adopted domestic laws and policies impose trade and investment restrictions on specific foreign products, offer subsidies to selected domestic industries, discriminate against foreign competitors, or strictly implement export control. We have a long list of such measures. These countries are also conducting security reviews of their supply chains and promoting a form of decoupling from certain specific partners. The problem is that although these actions purport to reduce external dependence and enhance domestic supply chain resilience and security, most, if not all, of those measures exceed the reasonable bound allowed by multilateral rules. So those measures are exclusionary and disruptive in nature. So they generally violate multilateral rules and increase economic costs for everybody and exacerbate the fragmentation of the instability of global supply chain. So that's the first category. The second category focuses on regional and minilateral arrangements. Some countries are engaging in small group coordination through bilateral or plurilateral mechanisms, forming close links with selected numbers of partners or allies in specific supply chains. While these arrangements may enhance stability among participating countries, they also create a new division in the global trading system by heightening a barrier for non-participants. In my experience, these club-based arrangements tend to lack clear rules, and their effectiveness indeed is limited by diverse national interest and coordination difficulties. The third category seeks rule coordination and risk mitigation through multilateral mechanisms. Several countries have attempted to leverage forums such as the WTO, G20, and APEC to encourage trade openness and foster global cooperation on supply chain resilience. One example is China. In late 2023, China submitted a WTO document titled Strengthening the Resilience and Stability of Global Industry and Supply Chain. China proposed a joint ministerial statement at the WTO's the 13th WTO Ministerial Conference in Abu Dhabi. The final outcome of MSC 13 incorporated paragraph 6, which emphasized the importance of open, inclusive, resilient, sustainable, diversified, and reliable global supply chain. You call a lot of terms self-contradictory with each other, but it's this. All those elements should be included, should be considered in the future when we draft international rules in this regard. Of course, and the problem is that those multilateral initiatives remain largely conceptual and have yet to yield any specific operational and binding instruments or disciplines. They are very hollow, and nobody seems to follow them after the meeting. So that's the problem we are faced at the multilateral. So now go to the second point I would like to highlight. Multilateralism matters. So we should try to use the multilateral forums to do something. Because in reality, we are likely to face an extended period during which all three categories of measures will coexist and intensify, particularly with unilateral restrictions becoming increasingly commonplace. And because more and more countries, because of their concern, because other countries are taking measures to protect their own security and stability, and they will join this process and take more trade distorting measures, protect yourself and hurt others, and others hurt you, then cause more disruption to the global supply chain. So I think responsible countries must not stand by while global rules erode and cooperation deteriorates. In light of the disruptive impacts of the first and the second categories of measures, strengthening multilateral mechanisms and promoting rule-based arrangements on supply chain security and stability should be viewed not only as a means of stopping or reversing today's negative cycle, but also as the most constructive pathway forward. This is not just preferable. It may be the only viable way, the only viable option left at the end when countries feel fatigue. In this context, I believe that initiating multilateral discussions towards a kind of global arrangement or global understanding on industry and supply chain security and stability is both feasible and necessary. Of course, and tangible breakthroughs may be unlikely in the short term, but early engagement is essential to prevent long-term disorder and further economic decoupling. That said, two critical questions arise. I think you may think all have these two questions. How should such arrangement be promoted? And what should it include? I would like to propose some tentative measures to address those two issues. The first one concerning in terms of the process. I think a group of like-minded, forward-looking countries, WTO members, should take the lead. They should not adopt a wait-and-see approach. Many countries are adopting this approach nowadays, either supply chain issues or the reciprocal tariffs adopted by the United States. Many countries just wait, and I think wait and see doesn't work nowadays. So they should launch informal working groups or plurilateral initiatives similar to joint statement initiatives within the platform such as WTO or G20. This would raise the visibility of this issue and build momentum. So the second, in terms of the substance, what the arrangement could include? I propose the following element. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list because I'm a law professor. I always think about what are the concrete bullet point in this proposal, different with the current rules. I listed 7 points. First one, reaffirming the applicability and authority of the existing WTO rules, okay, to highlight the importance. The second one is opposing decoupling measures based on nationality, purely based on nationality and economic models, and promote openness and inclusiveness. Well, those two is not something new. Third one, identifying acceptable conditions for invoking supply chain stability and security measures. That's the necessary, because sometimes you have the right to take some measures to protect the stability and the security. So what's the criteria, the possible conditions that are permitted? Possibly we could use a combined principles, exceptions, and quantitative threshold methodology to define and what kind of situation and what kind of situation and which sectors you could take some measures, what measures, the impact, and if we can have a limit on the impact. That might be a reasonable situation for a country to take measures. The fourth point, defining supply chain assurance obligation of countries holding dominant positions in key supply chains and specify prohibited restrictive actions. I think this is a point I thought. Any major supplier of any very particular critical inputs, you bear the responsibility because of the dominance. You bear a kind of responsibility towards the world to guarantee, to some extent, guarantee the supply, the stability of a supply. So a kind of supply assurance obligation should be discussed. And not many countries have such kind of supply chain dominance in particular sectors. So if every country say, okay, and if they have, yes, they would like to talk about this kind of obligation, or the other countries may feel a bit less nervous. The fifth point, regulating the use of a national security exception, possibly through a negative list of non-restrictive situations. Sixth point, strengthening the legal enforceability. The seventh point, establishing transparency. Of course, and the rule making will not be easy. But I think if we succeed, both the world economy and the rule-based trading system will benefit. So as a conclusion, and I would like to say that the sustainability of international economic cooperation depends on legal rules, political trust, and institutional stability. So only by doing so can we ensure long-term supply chain resilience and stability, and avoid the pitfalls of zero-sum confrontations. This is a responsibility that we must all share together, not only one country, all share together. That's my point. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So Professor Ji outlined many legal aspects. Of course, we talk about the multilateral system to sustain this supply chain, and which is kind of missing, and particularly WTO and furthermore. But of course, we have a regional framework available now, which is getting momentum, like RCEP, which is also, there's a lot of description of origin of the production, and of course CPTPP, which is another regional rising mechanism which European Union wants to join and China wants to join, and I think we probably need to actually reach consensus to this supply rules and not over securitizing or destabilize the supply chain. Anyway, I'd like to now introduce Ravi. He's a top mind in the world now, and also a chief editor of Foreign Policy, a widely read international magazine. And so Ravi, you've been watching things everywhere. You've been India, you've been U.S., UK, and Davos, and Munich, and everywhere. So what do you think about this supply chain that we're having now? We just Mr. Lin mentioned, like Tesla, they have a supply chain in China, and Apple they have, and Walmart purchase 60% of the supplies from China. So how can we do that? I mean, by having more Chinese investment overseas, or by more diversify, would be the way to go? Or let's hear from you. Yeah.
Sure, all of the above, I think. Listen, thank you, Henry, first of all, for putting together this lavish spread, inviting all of us. And I'll embarrass Henry for a minute, but I've run into him at Davos, Munich, Doha, around the world. And I have to say, it's so important to have connections to China in my line of work as an editor, as a journalist. The number of touch points he brings to dialogues around the world with China is absolutely invaluable. So I really thank you for the work you do and the engagement you bring in fora across the world. I'm not a trade expert, so I'm not going to try and act like I am one. And I don't have prepared remarks, but I'm going to say a few short things. And the first is that we are in an era of backlash around the world. For me, the predominant feeling in societies around the world is as follows. The last 3 or 4 decades, the biggest trend lines were more globalization, more capitalism, more urbanization, and more technological shifts. When you add up all of those forces together, a lot of good has happened in countries around the world. I should also add more democratization. All of these forces have transformed the world that we live in, especially in the West. There was an aspirational nature to all of these things. And something has shifted in the last decade or so. And you might be wondering, what does this have to do with trade? Well, it actually is related. We've known this for a while now, that the system, however you define the system hasn't quite worked for everyone. If you speak to people in rural communities of any country, anywhere in the world, there is a sense that things aren't working. There's a sense that there's been too much urbanization, our societies are hollowed out. There's a sense that there's too much inequality, our children aren't getting jobs. There's a sense that whatever my life was, my children won't have a better life. There are many, many reasons for why these problems are occurring. But one interpretation of it is that there's been too much trade and globalization, there's been too much free trade, too much unfettered capitalism, and all of these forces put together have left societies or certain segments of societies feeling left behind. You may or may not agree with this diagnosis, but it is a diagnosis that appeals to people who've been left behind. First of all, everyone loves to be told they've been left behind. And so the reason why I say we're in an era of backlash is that in country after country, it is now increasingly popular to have the rise of nationalism, the rise of populism, the anger and backlash against immigration, the sense that the last 3 or 4 decades of unfettered globalization, capitalism, all of the isms I've mentioned, that they haven't quite worked out. Right or wrong, that is the feeling that people in society after society currently have. This is important because one fine day during the pandemic, people in countries around the world woke up and realized, whoops, we don't make our own masks. Whoops, we don't make our own toilet paper. Big problem. And so now you have country after country looking to nearshore, friendshore, secure their supply chains. And this is why we're in the moment that we're in, where country after country is imposing protectionist measures. You said at the beginning we shouldn't have protectionism, but that is the era we're in. And we're not going to leave that era for many years to come. So the question is, what do you do about it? And I think for all of you who are policymakers, ambassadors, the work that you do, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that your populations are feeling like the global system as it is isn't quite working. The biggest fears I think younger people have is that their futures will not look like yours. The biggest thing, the biggest trend lines that younger people in all of your countries keep in mind is that the population growth is going to be unsustainable for the next 30 odd years before it turns around. And I'm talking now mostly about Africa. That is going to have an impact when you look at unfettered migration that is going to happen in all of your countries around the world, which will lead to more backlash, more anti-immigrant sentiment, more anger against globalization. The other linked certainty in the next 30 years is a rising acknowledgement of the problems with the climate crisis. It is going to get hotter and more humid in country after country after country, which is going to lead, by the way, to more immigration, much of it illegal. I think, to move to solutions finally, for anyone working in the arenas of trade, it is important to think, first of all, whatever rules they need to be followed. There's a general sense of impunity, especially after the pandemic, that the bigger you are, the more you can ignore the rules. Second, the climate of hostility between the United States and China, it does no service for most countries around the world. Most countries around the world consider these two economies to be their biggest trading partners. That's not going to change. For countries that have relied on free trade and globalization, think of Sri Lanka, think of Lesotho, think of countries that are dependent on tourism and global trade. they have no route to secure their own supply chains. So when we talk of diversifying or securing supply chains, remember that most countries don't have that option. So what can the biggest countries, the most important countries in the world do? I personally think one thing, and especially China here, but also the United States, could really focus on is ensuring that developing countries have the means and the finance to green their economies. I mean, I'm blown away by the advances China has made on electric vehicles, on solar and wind, were China, without restrictions from the United States, able to bring a lot of that technology at low costs to much of Africa, to much of South Asia, to much of Southeast Asia, you would see a transformative effect that would make people rethink the benefits of free trade, that would make people rethink what globalization actually is and what it can be in the future. So really, just to sort of solidify my point here, keep in mind that in the next 30 years, there will be more anger against immigration, there will be more concerns about the climate crisis, and the city we're all sitting in has actually figured out much of the answers to decarbonization and to clean electricity. We need to figure out, all of us, how to make sure that those technologies reach the countries that need it the most, mostly in the global south. That on its own will restore faith in trade and globalization. Thanks, all of you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you, Ravi. Excellent point. Actually, you are right. You know, so the world actually, we see the globalization. Of course, we also see some side effect. Of course, the widening gap between rich and poor. Right? That's quite true. And also that's why China trying to lift 800 million people out of poverty to prevent more people getting into extreme poverty. So that is something China started earlier to do that. But also again, also on the Green Revolution, China also realized that is the future. So I absolutely echo your point, and that's where I think the future supply chain should also help in the developing country, global south, and of course we need to really embrace this green revolution. So I think we had a very fabulous opening discussion. But now we'd like to and Q&A will throughout the questions and ask our panelists if you have any questions to answer. That's one of the part of the dialogue, is that we we also engage ambassadors, representatives of embassies and the media and multinational. So let's have a first question, or anybody has any questions to raise. Yes, ambassador from Pakistan. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. Just a quick one. I think reacting to what Mr. Agrawal said, I think he makes eminently sensible points. But as someone who has worked in the system, I have spent half of my diplomatic career in the multilateral world. But what we are confronted today is unprecedented, certainly. It's rather easy to say follow the rules. It's very obvious and very sensible, but we are seeing rules are not being followed. The institutions and the architecture that was built after the Second World War, it's obvious. I don't need to narrate what is happening in the world, whether on the trade side or on the more normative side, the political or diplomatic side. So my question is, I think, how do we make sure, and how do we, with a bigger problem is, when those countries which actually frame the rules are not following those. So how do small countries or civil society or NGOs or others, think tanks, what can they do to make sure that the bigger and the powerful countries, they actually follow the rule? The rest will follow. But the most difficult challenge is to make the most powerful countries follow the rules themselves.
Okay, great. Maybe we'll get another two before we have the round of answers. Yes. Ambassador from Netherlands.
Yeah, André Haspels, Netherlands Ambassador. Thank you very much for organizing this, and thanks to the panelists. I guess we all talk about supply chains, but we also talked, and Ravi did that most, I think, in the biggest part of his contribution, about the uncertainties in the world and the risks that are there. Now, my question actually is, where are we with the supply chains in 10 years' time? Do we continue to work on global supply chains? And I know that there are a lot of efforts to bring companies abroad and to bring companies to China, but I also learned that there are a lot of risks in global trade, in players that don't stick to the rules, etc., etc. So global supply chains is one option, but there are also other options. You could go to a model where there are more regional supply chains in blocks, regional blocks around the world, and you could even go back and fall to an option where there are just national supply chains within China, within Europe, within the United States, within other parts of the world. So my question to the panelists, and I don't know who feels responsible to reply to it, where are we in 10 years' time, given all the uncertainties? What would be your prediction?
Thank you, Ambassador from Netherlands. We have one more question before we get into discussion. Okay, there's a... Oh, that's great. So let's start. Maybe Ravi, you want to start, and then we'll see any other. I know Madam Zhao also has something urgent you need to attend to. Huh? You can free yourself too. Yes.
Sure, I can take a quick stab. I will say on the question of what countries can do, I think around the world, when I spoke of this moment of backlash, this moment of anger, first of all, we have to acknowledge why people are angry. Everyone does. Something wasn't working. So the diagnosis, I think, left and right can all agree that something wasn't working. Where we cannot agree, no matter who you are, is what the solution is. And I am of the opinion that there are broadly two camps. There's a reform camp and there's a revolution camp. There's a camp that believed the system, the architecture, needed some tweaks and reforms, and then we'd be fine. And there's a camp that believed we needed to upend the system, we needed to blow it up. My sense is there's some countries that are in the process of blowing up their systems and also the global system. And my sense is also that prognosis, that plan to blow up the system, it ain't gonna work. I think in a couple of years, in 3 or 4 years maybe, I think people will realize that revolution could lead to something much worse than reform could have. And this moment is the moment for everyone who believes in reform to actually come up with smart reforms, to come up with a plan for when the revolutionaries fail, you have a plan that could then be applied. And part of that plan is, first of all, accepting that something went wrong, and then having the humility to say, I was part of that system that wasn't quite working, and then come up with the plans. So whoever you are, big country, small country, I think that's really important. A bit of humility about what went wrong, and then a plan, when the time is right, for how we can put in place that plan. That also, I think, answers your question, sir, about where we are in 10 years. A lot of where we are in 10 years on supply chains depends on the mood of the moment of whether the revolutionaries are still ascendant or if the reformists are back. And the reformists, again, if they are back, they'll need to be back in a way that wasn't smug, but that was full of humility, in that the system had flaws, we're here to fix it. That's going to be, I think, the defining conversation globally in the next decade.
Okay. I don't know if Madam Zhao want to say a few words before you leave. Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to share the trend of the globalization. And I think although there is a hot discussion about the reshaping of global supply chains, but I still trust the globalization is a mainstream, because many events just in the past year, like COVID-19 pandemic and Red Sea crisis, Russia-Ukraine conflicts, make people think about what kind of mode of global supply chain is better. So a lot of experts discuss about that and give a lot of prediction about the trend of the globalization, something like regionalization, diversification, and so on. But in fact, the role of the globalization, in fact, multinational company is a big role in the globalization, and they'd like to allocate their resources just around the world. And where something is cheap, they'd like to buy the materials over there. And where the demand is strong, they'd like to sell their products over there. So just because they try to pursue the profit, that gives the very big force for globalization. Although the policies from a major economy changed a lot, but I believe the multinational company always find the answer for globalization. Thank you. Thank you for excusing me because of my tight schedule. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Zhao. Yes. Okay, I don't know if Mr. Lin has anything to add.
Oh, yeah. Last year when we visited WTO, Madame Iwela told us a new concept of reglobalization. Although the voice of WTO now is very weak, I have to say that. But I think that's a very good idea. We think we should understand the value of reglobalization. As Dr. Agrawal said, why we have so many conflicts now, because there must be some people feeling that they are not benefiting from the globalization. So it's now we are in the stage, we are in the of making a new how to say making new rules. Yeah, that's the reason why so many countries now are in new dialogues of either multinational or regional trade patterns, new patterns. One thing I think China can do, what we are doing now, is to encourage the international Chinese companies, when they go global, they should take more responsibilities to help to support the investment destinations, I mean those economies, to develop, to extend their local industrial chains. That's the reason why, again, as I said, why we organize this expo. We want to show the best, the strongest supply chain in China, the industrial chain in China, and invite other countries, governments, companies to visit, to talk with these big players in China, and invite them to make investment in other countries. One thing impressed me very much is in 2023, when I participated in the China Arab Business Forum in Saudi Arabia, the Minister of Investment of Saudi Arabia, when we met, he told me he wanted to visit this expo. Why? Because he is very eager to know who are the key players of the strong supply chains in China. He wanted to invite those key players to Saudi Arabia. He said in the past, Saudi Arabia also had a lot of Chinese big companies to make investments in Saudi Arabia, but they just saw a lot of failure cases. In 2 or 3 years, these companies left. Why? Because there are no supply chain system in Saudi Arabia to support these Chinese companies. Even no supply chain system in this whole Middle East area. Still, this because the Chinese companies, not like Japanese companies, not like American companies, they have rich experience of going global. for over 100 years. But Chinese companies just went global. They just had experience maybe 20 years. So they are in shortage, lack of experience. They are sometimes they were very brave, and they went and they fail and they come back. I saw thousands of such cases. So I think what we should do is as a minister, he said he would like to invite a group of Chinese companies. They can connect to each other along the supply chain. And then they will set up industrial zones in Saudi Arabia to support these Chinese companies to develop. I think that's a very good idea. And he said he copied this experience from Chinese opening up, from China's opening up. Yes, we did that. I think that's a good model. And we can talk with other countries. We can do that. But still, from my organization, from CCPIT, what we are doing now is to teaching those companies when they go global, they should notice, they should share with suppliers, local suppliers. They should develop local suppliers, not do by themselves. Just as I mentioned, these car makers, those cases. There are very different personalities of the owners of these car makers. Some of them, they like to do everything alone, and they never share. They never share food, they never share resources. But some of them, they are very smart. Just like, as I said, Peng, this company, Mr. Huiyao Ping, he's a very good guy. He's a friend to me. He told me when he visited, after he visits to France, to Spain, he said he's very confident in his future profit in Europe. Of course, he believes the European Commission should keep its promise of the tariff and the taxation policy, should have a consistency. Consistency is always a problem to Chinese companies. Many of them are not they don't trust in the Western system because it changes so quickly. After one government, they changed. After then, they totally, they wasted a lot of resources. So as he said, as long as the European Commission can keep the current taxation, he definitely can make profit. And he would like to have the first tier of suppliers and the second tier of suppliers in Spain, in France, in Austria. He can do that. So I think there are hundreds of such companies. We should support them to share, profit, to share industrial to extend the industrial chains in their destinations of investment. And that's the core value of reglobalization.
Okay, good. A lot of examples, cases. Good point. So I don't know, if Professor Zhi has any briefly.
Very brief, and thanks, Ambassador, for a very good question concerning how we can encourage the big powers to abide by rules. Of course, at a multilateral level, this is a phenomenon not very strange to everybody. So usually we blame them, and then we try to form a united front to consider new rules. And of course, and it takes time. And bilaterally, and business navigate the turbulence. They find their way to make a business, to make investment. But I would like to say that many of such kind of business or arrangements, indeed, they will create some problems. For example, you came here and invest me here, I give you subsidy, and other countries will have concerns. So we all see a lot of, new problems. We want to solve the current problem. So I'm advocating multilateralism is not because it's the only way. It might be one effective at the end. Because of course countries could do what they want bilaterally, but I don't think finally the bilateral measures would be able to press others to change their policies. And with respect to the reshaping of global supply chain, my point is that if the reshaping of the global supply chain is based on economic consideration, fair rules, fair enough, reasonable blocks. But when you're building such blocks, you intentionally create some rules to expel some, unreasonably expel some other trade partners using many unreasonable criteria. That's create problems. Thank you.
Okay, great, Professor Ji. Okay, maybe I can share a bit of my thought at the end as well. Two ambassadors' question was excellent, actually. I think in the 10 years' time, I would expect the globalization continue. Probably more inclusive, updated globalization. The reason for that is that you can see this this trade war, the second term, and China and U.S. already had quite a, it's so difficult to really separate. It's hurting so much. Because, for example, the Trump said there's a 400 billion deficit, but once he's going to levy tax on that, he immediately, waiver 100 billion because Apple was selling 80% phone in China, Tesla was making 50% of EV cars in China, Walmart was purchasing 60% supplies from China. So it's going to hurt the U.S. and then Christmas and the supermarket will be empty if he pursued that. That's why we see so quickly the talks in Geneva and in London now coming up in Sweden now. So what I do see though is that this imposing tariff on every country could be still working. So that's abandon of what Biden does on the geopolitical alliances, AUKUS, Quad, Camp David. Now Trump even want to put up the AUKUS, but he's setting up tariff circles. The one he did with Vietnam, with Indonesia, with Japan. So you can see there he still has that economic barriers alliance on that. So that probably Trump is doing. But what I will see is actually China is doing the opposite. And for example, recently the Singapore Prime Minister was visiting China. They were saying, let's move the Suzhou industrial park model to other countries. And then Mr. Ji was mentioning, Mr. Lin was mentioning that the Chinese industrial parks is moving the supply chain to a whole country. For example, I know one entrepreneur. He set up a big industrial park in Ethiopia. He's a big shoemaker, employed 8,000 African workers. But then he brought in other Chinese supply to that part of the industrial park of Ethiopia, helping the local country. So I think that, there's thousands of industrial parks in China, special economic zones, returning park. So they can be in the future probably move their supply chain to other countries to sustain and support local supply chains. That could be a trend, I would say, if they invest heavily. Like I was talking to Pascal Lamy, he was a former WTO Director General in my office just a few months ago. We were talking, we have so much JV now with European countries in China. Why can't we go out together? JV Chinese companies supply chain to invest back into Europe, invest in Africa, Latin America, and same for Tesla. Let's do the Shanghai miracle, replicate that to other parts of the U.S. or other countries. So that probably will be the trend in the future if we do not have this geopolitical interference too much. Business will always find the best solution for themselves. So I think that probably we have to work for is the really the business we have. That's why I think I can congratulate on Mr. Lin for this supply chain expo, because then you bring all the business together. They want to find out can you come to my place? I can go to your place. Let's build the new generation of supply chain, and particularly fighting the climate change, as Ravi just rightly said. So I think there was so much thing going on, and it's great that we have those ideas thrown around, and so I think we're probably running out of time. But I know you are all busy. I have a very busy schedule, but I would like to appreciate all of you coming to our event and share all your ideas, particularly our four speakers. Let's give them a warm applause again. And